Hello guys, welcome back to a new video of our to-do series. Now, if you have seen the old videos of the to-do app that we have created, so basically this is the app that we have created in various parts. So we started with the UI design in Figma, then converting the design to HTML and CSS, then making it work with the help of JavaScript, and then finally we persisted the data into local storage. Okay, so this is the final app that we have created. It's a basic to do app, so I can type any task. It adds the task to the table, and I can mark it complete, or I can remove the check mark to make it pending, or I can even double click. And when you double click, we have a separate video on how we have created this model dialog, and here if you just select yes, delete it, that particular to do is deleted. Okay, so this is what we have created till now. Now today what we are going to do is we are going to learn how to modularize your project. Okay, so basically now if you look at the code, so you can see the structure is very simple. There is a index.html. So this is for all those who are looking at this video for the first time. So there is a basic HTML for the page, and there is a main.css which is having all the styles related to the to do app. And I also have a separate div for the modal confirm model that is popping up when we delete the particular element. And this is the script that is used to load the JavaScript. Okay, and this is where all our JavaScript code is, which makes everything work. Okay, now basically the process is very simple. You have a to dos variable which is storing all your to-dos, and as soon as the page the JavaScript loads, it reads the local storage to get any to-dos that is already stored in the local storage. If there are any to-dos, then that will be replaced over here. Okay, so literally every time we load, this entire object is replaced by whatever is stored inside the array. Okay, then you can see the basic idea is I have added an event listener to the submit form, that is this text box. So I have added an event listener, and whenever that particular text or the form is submitted, I call this particular function, which is basically adding that particular to do to the to dos array. Okay, and as soon as I do that, I render the to do so that it is visible on the HTML, and I also do calculate to do status. Okay, now this is not that optimized right now, we will do it in this particular video. Then similarly we have a click event listener on those checkboxes, which is used to mark them complete or pending. And then we have a double click event on the entire TR, so that whenever we double click, that particular modal is opened, you can see from here. And then in the modal, when the modal is opened, I have two buttons over there. The cancel button will simply close the modal, but if you approve the confirm dialog, then that particular item is deleted from the to dos array using this particular statement. And as soon as I delete it, I again run this particular statement, that is render to do and calculate to do status, and then I close the modal. Okay, and you can see the functions that does it. So add to do item has a validation whether it is empty or not. Then if it is not empty, then it does a simple push. Okay, then if you go down, there is a calculate to do status function, which is basically just finding out how many are complete and how many are pending, and that is run. And then the render to do is basically going through all the elements in the to-dos and generating the HTML for that. Okay, and because we are using local storage, I have created this function where, so whenever you do a new render, you immediately save it to the storage. Okay, now next we will come over here and we are calling the render to do, and you can look at the save storage and get to dos from storage function. It is pretty simple. All you in the save storage, all you're doing is you are setting an item called to dos, and obviously you cannot store the to-dos object array of objects directly, so you are doing JSON stringify and then storing it. And because you're storing it in JSON stringify, then when you receive when you want to decode it, you have to use JSON parse. Okay, so this is how the entire code works. Now let's see how to modularize this code. Okay, so first step would be to generalize this particular module, and there we are not going to consider about the local storage, and then we are going to make different modules for different storage. Okay, so basic funda of modularization is that whenever you modularize any particular element or any particular part, you should try to modularize in such a way that if you replace, like for example, in my case, what I am trying to do is right now the to-dos are stored in an array. Okay, so there are multiple options that I can do. So first I can store it in an array, or I can store it in local storage, or in future I may store it in some database, right? So based on what type of a storage mechanism I am going to use, I don't want to change my logic over here. Okay, so my main code, that is main.js, should not I should not have to alter a lot of code because I want to change the storage mechanism. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to abstract all the functions of the to-dos related task to a separate module, and that module will have the main.js will have no business in finding out what is the way in which that particular module is handling the data. Okay, so basically main.js has only one responsibility: to call the modules methods, and it doesn't care how that method is handled. Okay, so like for example, in this particular case, if you see in this event listener submit, you are adding a to do item. Right now, when you call this function, you can see this function is defined here itself in the main.js. Okay, so the main.js knows how the particular function is handled, right? But these did not be the case. Okay, so I may change this add to do based on the type of storage I'm using, right? So like for example, in an array it may be slightly different, in local storage it will be, the add to do function will be different, and in a database it may be different, right? So I cannot have multiple versions of this function in a single file. So what I'm trying to do is I am going to abstract everything, and I will show you how I'm going to do that. So the first step that I'm going to do is I'm going to the JS folder and create a new file. Let's call it to-dos array. Okay, so first I'm going to handle if what happens if I'm going to use an array. Okay, so I've created this. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to export. Let's first create a class. Okay, so class, let's call it to do. Okay, so this is the class, and I want to export this so that it can be imported into main.js. Okay, so I will just have to add export class to do. Okay, so once I do this, now I can export that particular class. Okay, now if you have if you want only one thing to be exported, you can write default. Okay, So export default, in that case you can you can be sure that only one of the things will be exported, that is only one default is possible in a particular module. Okay, so once this is done, now I have my module ready, right? So in this module I can have a constructor. Okay, so every class can have a constructor. Okay, and then inside this I can have various functions. Okay, so let me write down some of the functions. So there should be a function to add a to do. Okay, and when I call this function, there has to be a to do attached to it. Okay, so basically there should be an object which is going to have a title and a status, right? So that to do is going to be there. Then I also want to remove to do, that is to delete a to do. So again here when I want to remove a to do, I need to provide the ID of the to do which I want to remove. Okay, then I want to mark a to do complete, right? So I can say mark complete. Okay, so you can be as descriptive as possible so that your functions or your methods make sense. So again, when you mark complete, now to make a to do complete, you need to have an ID that which to do is to be marked complete, right? So I will pass that ID. So similarly I will have one more that will be mark pending. So mark pending, so this is there. Again, mark pending also will need an ID. Then let us see what else do we need. Okay, so we have add to do, remove to do, mark complete, and mark pending. Okay, now we may need more to dos, like more functions in other library, other, what do you say, storage mechanisms, that is local storage and other database. Okay, so there we may have few more functions, but right now this is enough. And I need two more functions which are basically one for render to do. Okay, so if you remember, we had a function for rendering the to dos onto the HTML, and we also have a function to calculate the status. Okay, so I can say calculate status. Okay, so I have these functions already set. Okay, and next, now I want to start populating this. Okay, so let's come over here and let's get this to do. So we have this array already set, so I can come over here, paste it over here, and instead of putting it inside a to dos variable that will become a local variable, I want to set this as this dot to dos. Okay, so now what happens is, now this dot to dos will help us in making this particular property available in all the functions. Okay, so that is what we want. That's why we have saved this particular array of objects into this dot to dos. Okay, so you can see what is exactly happening is, whenever I create a new object from this class, immediately this constructor will be run, and when this constructor is run, this particular variable will have these data. Okay, so once that is done, next would be, now let's find out what should be next. I want to add a to do. Right now, to add a to do, it's going to be simple function for when using arrays. So this dot I can do to dos dot push. So it is the same command that we have written over here, and instead of a title, I am passing a to do. Okay, so complete object I am passing. So you can see it is very simple. If you come to the code over here, this is the add to do item function that we have created, and if you come down over here, we are using the same the push command, right? So todos dot push, and inside that we are passing a object, right? So the object had two properties, the title and the status. Okay, the same object we are going to pass over here also, and that is going to be pushed onto this array. Okay, so that is done. Now I want to write the code for remove to do. So for remove to do, I can come down and find out where I have yeah, so in remove to do, this is what we have done. So to do splice, so I can take the same code. Now there is no to do's variable over here, so that is replaced by this dot to do, to do's, and then splice, and the id comes from here. That's why I have passed in the id, and I want to delete one item. Okay, so that deletes the item. Then next, to mark complete. Okay, so now let's come over here and let's see to mark complete. Yeah, here is the code. So this is the code to mark it complete, right? So I will copy that code, come over here, paste it, and again there is nothing called as to do's, so I have to replace it by this dot to do's, and instead of e.target.id, now I am passing the id directly, so I can just replace it by id, and the status is complete. Okay, now the same command I will copy, paste it over here, and replace it by pending. Okay, so that is because I am marking that particular to do pending. Okay, now once that is done, now I have to write the code for render to do and also for calculate the status. Okay, so now let's come back and find out those two functions. So I have render to do, so this is the render to do function. I will copy, I will not copy the save to storage because that was the part of local storage, right? So I will copy this much, come over here, and I will put it over here. Okay, so render to do. So basically what is happening is now HTML body, I would prefer, now it's already there, but I would prefer to have it inside that. So this may be a bad practice, but I'm putting it over here. Okay, so I'm retrieving the to do table body element from here. Okay, and then I am giving it making it blank because I'm starting fresh. Then I am finding out to do's dot length. Okay, now to do's dot length will not be there, right? So instead of that, I will be doing this dot to do's dot length, and then if that length is less than equal to 0, means there is no to do's right now, so I am just writing no to do's added till now. Okay, and if there are any to do's, then that will be handled by this part. Okay, so once that is done, next I am going to do, let's see. Okay, so let's come over here, and what I'm doing is to do's. Again, this to do's will not work, so I have to write this dot to do's and for each. So I'm looping through each one of them, and I'm finding out the to do as well as the id of that particular to do. Okay, so that is stored in I, and to do is the actual object. Okay, so now then I'm this entire thing is going to work because it is related to the variable that is inside, right? So now this is going to work perfectly. Now I can save it. Now one more thing left is calculate status. So let's come over here and find out the code for calculate to do status. Copy everything, come over here and paste it. So now again I have total 0, complete 0, that is fine, but here let to do of to do's. So this to do's is not available, so I have to replace it by this dot to do's. Then total, I'm checking everything is fine, and then I am doing a query selector to select the, okay, so I think rest everything is perfect, and that's it. Our module is ready to be imported. Okay, so now I will save it. Okay, now I can bring that particular module in. Okay, So let's bring that in. So to bring the module in, you have to do two things. Okay, so first step would be to go to index.html, and the place where you are trying to import a module, in that file should be an attribute should be added called module. Okay, so you should add type equal to module for that particular file. Okay, so you can see main.js is where I'm going to import. So that particular JavaScript file should have a type equal to module. Once that is done, now I can come at the top, you can write import, and because the import export we have done as default, so we can directly write to do over here. Okay, to do from I have to mention the, so you can see I have this already populated for me thanks to Visual Studio Code. So this is my to do, right? So I have imported this to do class from the this particular file, to do's array. Okay, now if that is now this syntax is true because I have used export default, right? So when you do like this, that default whatever you have exported, that will be imported over here. Okay, so if you don't use default, then you will have to use an template object literals over here to get the data. Okay, now next step, I will remove this get to dos from storage because we are not using local storage right now. The next step would be to create an object. Okay, so let's create an object. So let to do object, let's call it to do object, is equal to new to do. Okay, so this is going to be my object. Okay, now you can see the constructor is empty. I am not passing in anything because if you look at the constructor, I am not accepting anything over here. Okay, so that is fine. So I have created the to do object, everything is fine. Now we can start refactoring our main.js and make it much more independent of the way we are storing it. Okay, so let's move it side by side so that you can see what is exactly happening. Okay, so now I have done this. Now you can see it is in a light gray color. That is because right now I'm not using the to do's object. Okay, so let's start using it. So one by one I am going to replace all the functions with the methods that are there in this particular object. Okay, so let's begin. So when the form is submitted, I prevent the default, then I do to do title, right? And then over here I'm going to do, instead of add to do item, I'm going to do to do object dot add to do. Okay, so you can see it already populates, and instead of just passing the title, I have to pass an object, and that object is going to be to do title is the first, and it should be title. Okay, so I'm going to pass in the title and the status. So there are two things, if you recall. I will just show you the array, and initially it is going to be pending. Okay, so that is how I'm going to handle it. So now if you go back, you can see this is the exact structure of one to do. Okay, so that is what I am exactly passing over here also. Okay, so once that is done, now you can see next function is render to do, and we have a method for that over here. So render to do. So all I have to do is copy this. So instead of directly calling this, I am going to call it from the object. Okay, so to do object dot render to do. Similarly, I have an object, I have a function called calculate status. Okay, so I have now renamed calculate to do status with calculate status, and again this is an method of the object, so I will prepend it with this. Okay, so now this should work if everything is proper. Let's save it and let's see if everything works. So let's add something, and it doesn't work. Let's see what is the error. So let's open. Okay, I think I forgot to add JS. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, so this is done. Now next, so that is working now, but because we have created functions, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove all these unnecessary functions that we have. Okay, so we will remove this render to do because we have put it inside to do's array, so render to do will no longer be there. Then I don't want save to storage and get to dos from storage. So let me clean up all these things. Again, I don't need calculate to do status because that also I have moved it inside the uh, to do's array JavaScript file. Again, add to do item, I don't need, that also is there, and remaining things it will be there. Okay, so now let us save it and see if there is any error. Okay, so there is now no error. Now these few errors that are coming is just because of some extensions that I have installed. That is not a problem. And now let me add something so you can see it works. Okay, so it works for adding, but obviously it will not work for other things. Okay, so you can see other things are not working because we have to manipulate this also now. Okay, now for everything we are having a function or method inside our class, right? So we have to replace all these things with that particular function. Okay, so let's come over here, and so the logic, everything is same, only thing is the way we want to mark it complete is now changed. Okay, so the only thing that we have to do is we can copy this, delete this part, call the object, that is to do object dot mark. So this is mark complete, and inside this I am just going to pass the ID. Okay, so you can see the syntax for mark to do. Okay, so sorry, mark complete, the parameter was just the ID. Okay, so that is what I'm passing over here. And similarly in for the pending, I'm just going to replace it with to do object mark pending and the target ID. Okay, so now once this is done, now again you can see the to do function is called and calculate to do status, so that can be replaced by these two methods. Okay, so wherever there is this render to do and calculate status, there I can replace it by the new method. Okay, so I can replace it over here, and I think nowhere else that function is there. Okay, next I can come down to the double click. Now for the double click, you are going to run the remove option right now, but in this particular event listener you are not actually removing anything, you are just opening the model, right? So it is at this particular state where it is getting removed. Okay, so you can see this is the function on which, due to which it is getting removed. Okay, so now let me just try to replace this with the command that we have, that is remove to do. Okay, so let's do that, and I'm going to do object dot remove to do, and remove to do requires only one parameter, that is ID. Okay, so if we can go back and see, only ID is required. Okay, and I think that is it. We have completely changed the code, and we are using now a module. Okay, so now let's refresh and try it out. If I mark this complete, now still there is something wrong. Let's find out what is the error that is coming. So cannot set property status of undefined. Okay, let me see what is the problem. Okay, I think I forgot to call the render function over here. Okay, so after declaring the to-dos, so I have to render it. Oh, I got it. So basically what I am doing, yeah, understood. So basically what data that you're getting over here is actually this data over here. Okay, so I have already kept a little bit of HTML as dummy, and that is what is showing up over here, and there is no ID. Okay, so now usually this would be replaced by our array, but the problem was in the constructor I am assigning the to dos, but I have never called the render function. Okay, so that I forgot. So let's call that. So this dot render to do. Okay, so after doing this, it should give me the result. So now you can inspect it and find out whether you have the sorry, I did a mistake. Instead of remove to do, I should do render to do. Okay, now I can save it, and now you can see you are getting an ID equal to 1. Okay, so for this one, sorry, the last one, it should be ID equal to 3, right? Perfect. Okay, so now it's working. So it was a small mistake from my side. And also one more thing is, whenever I call render to do, after that immediately I'm also calling calculate status, right? That is because to update this particular thing, right? So that also I will have to call. So I can say this dot calculate status, right? And now I can save. Now everything should work, right? And let's add something, and that works. If I mark it complete, that works. I can mark all of them complete, and that updates with congratulations. And then if I want, I can delete any particular item. And that is not working, I think. Yeah, it's working. Okay, so there were 5 elements, now there are 3. If I delete it one more time, that is also working. Perfect. So everything is working. Now a little more of optimization I can do. Now if you go through this particular file and this particular file, you will see that whenever I call render to do, after that immediately I'm calling calculate status. Okay, so I can reduce the amount of code by simply taking this particular function. Okay, and because whenever I'm calling render to do, after that anyway I'm calling calculate status, so I can come to the render to do itself, and before closing it I can call calculate status also. Okay, so that now I don't have to run calculate status separately. So now I can remove this from here, and from here. Okay, so now I don't need to worry about running the calculate status again and again. So you can see it still works, everything works perfectly. Okay, so now we have successfully converted our normal main.js to a module. Okay, so I have taken every function that was there which was manipulating the to-dos, and I've taken it, extracted it to another file, that is todos.array. Okay, so now you can see we have successfully completed this part. So now we will see how we can easily change our implementation to some other storage implementation with the help of these modules. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this to dos array, save it as to dos local storage. Okay, so the name is completely your choice. Okay, so once I save it, now what I want to do is, instead of getting the arrays, to do array like this, I'm going to get the array from my local storage. Okay, so now in this case, when I was storing it in an array, I was hard coding it directly, but in when you want to get it from the local storage, you will have to first read it, right? So I'm going to add another function towards the, let's add it over here. So in this function, I'm going to do get to dos. Okay, so I'm just going to write get to dos over here, and let's write the logic to get the to dos from the local storage. Okay, so let local to dos, okay, I'm calling it as local to dos. I'm going to take local storage and get item, and the place where I want to store it is to dos. Okay, so this is the name I'm going to take. So this is going to give me a string, but I don't want a string, I want an array of objects. So I just have to pass this string to json dot parse. Okay, and that will convert that JSON string to an array of objects. Okay, so once I have that, then I want to do a check whether when you load it for the first time, there will be no to dos item, right? So if there is no to dos item, then you should put the to dos as an empty array, otherwise the entire code fails. Okay, so you can do if let's say if local okay, so if not local to dos, that means if it is not if it is empty. Okay, so we can return an empty array. Okay, so instead of this, I am going to return an empty array. Else I am going to return, you can put an else, or you can simply return local to dos. Okay, so you can put it inside else also, but a better programming technique will be, because there is no need of an else when you use a return in the above statement. Okay, so because after this return, it is never going to come down, right? So if this runs, then this will run only if there is an else, right? Okay, so now once this is done, now by calling this function, I am getting the to dos, right? Local to dos from the storage. So let's call that function. So instead of hard coding it over here, I'm going to do this dot get to dos and save it. Okay, so let's see if that works. So I have this to dos, I'm rendering it, and let's see if I inspect and go to application, and right now what I have is I have a to dos which is empty. Okay, so it's an empty array, and then I am rendering it, and something is going wrong, I think. Let me just refresh. The problem is in the main.js, we are still using that to dos array and not this new file. Okay, so I just have to replace it by local storage, and now it will use this particular file. Okay, so you can see as soon as I saved it, you are getting no to dos added till now. Okay, so I can say hello, and that works. Okay, so now let's see what other changes I will have to do. Okay, so get to dos is fine. So I have added a new function, and which is just reading the JSON, the local storage, and giving you the to dos array. Okay, now one thing you should note over here is I am not changing any code in the main.js. Okay, I am just except for including the import. Other than that, I am not changing anything over there. So whatever is happening is happening inside the module itself. Okay, so I'm just changing the functions of the module. So now I have added this particular element. Next I want to add another element that is going to uh, we have a function to get the to-dos. Now we also need a function to save the to-dos to the local storage. Okay, so right now all these functions that you see, they all are just uh, making the changes to that particular array. Okay, and it is not actually saving it to the local storage. So I'm going to create a new function which is, let's call it save to-dos. Okay, and now these two functions, that is get to dos and save to dos, these are going to be internal functions which are not going to be used by the main.js. Okay, so that means main.js need not know that these functions are there. Okay, so it is basically going to be used by the other functions. Okay, so let's see how to handle save to dos. So save to dos is going to be very simple. You just take the local storage, do set item, and which key that you want to set, that is to dos. If you remember, we are using that particular key. And what do you want to set? So you want to save the this dot to dos inside this. Okay, but your local storage always stores a string, right? So and this dot to dos is an array of objects, so you cannot do that. So now you have to convert this into a string. So that is very simple. A single command, json.stringify, that will convert any object or an array to a string, that is JSON string, and that's it. So whenever we call this function, whatever is there in this dot to dos will be saved inside local storage. Okay, so now if I save it, and obviously this is not going to work right now because I am not using this function anywhere. Okay, so let me show you what do I mean. So let me add some few to dos. You can see I've added 3 to dos. Now if I refresh, everything is gone, right? So that is the problem over here, because I am just getting the to dos, but I have never saved it, right? Now to save it, you can see I will have to run this after every change to the to-dos object or to-dos array, right? So you can see in the add to-do function, I am changing the array to-dos, right? So immediately I should remember that I should call dot save to-dos. Okay, so once I do that, whatever objects changed, that will be immediately saved. Okay, so this function I can now run it whenever the to-dos change. Okay, so here also you can see I'm deleting the particular object. So again I am doing save to-dos. Here also mark complete. So here also I am doing a delete. I can remove this console log, and after deleting it, after changing the status, I'm going to do save to dos, and marking pending also. After that I'm going to do save to dos. Okay, so once all this is done, now my code should be ready, right? And now let's add hello world. Okay, so I have added two to do tasks, and if you refresh right now, if everything is working, then these two things must be there. Okay, see, it is there. Okay, so everything is persisted. Now just to prove that it is persisted, I can go to application, I can go to local storage. You can see in the to dos there are 2 elements, right? So I can add a third element, simple, and immediately you can see another element is added. Okay, and if you mark it complete, you can see here also it is marked complete. So you can see perfectly our app is working. And now is the best part. Okay, so now you have modularized your code. Now let's suppose you don't want to use local storage and you want to use an array, right? Array for storage. You just have to replace this with array and nothing else. Okay, so your entire code remains the same. Okay, so you can see what is the advantage of modularizing your code. Okay, so immediately once I do this, now the entire program is working with arrays. So if I add few of them and if I refresh, you can see everything goes away because it is not persisted. Okay, because it is using arrays. Now if I replace this with local storage, okay, and if I save, you can see immediately it loads the previous data that we had, and if I want, I can mark this complete, and if I refresh, you can see it stays there. Okay, so it is now persisted. Okay, so I hope you understood how to modularize your project, and this particular way of doing your project will help you doing complex projects very easily. Now one problem with the to do right now is it is persisted on your local computer, that too on your local browser that you're using. Okay, so if you try to use it on a different browser, let me show you. Let me go to Mozilla. So I'm opening Mozilla over here and I'm going to paste this. Okay, so you can see in this particular app, both are the same app, right? But there is no to do over here. Okay, so even though they are running on the same PC, you can see there is no to do over here, but there is a to do. There are 3 to dos over here, and if I add something over here, let's say, okay, so I have added 2 colors, and now if you refresh over here, this will have a separate set of to dos and this will have a separate set of to dos. Okay, so you can see the problem over here. Now we would want the to dos to be reflected everywhere, right? Like for example, if I create a to do over here and tomorrow if I go to another computer and open my website and look at my to dos, then obviously I would want to see my to dos that I have created a day before, right? So that is not possible right now. So that is what we are going to do in the next part of this particular series, where we are going to store this particular to do app data to a Firebase data store. Okay, so we are going to use Firebase to persist our data so that our data is persisted everywhere, okay, instead of just your local computer. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this video. We will see in the next video soon. Thank you.